I drove 200 miles through a blizzard thinking I was saving my mother from freezing to death. But the truth chills me more than the ice. She wouldn't have been standing there without a script. When I pulled her into my car, her hands were frozen stiff, yet the legal papers she clutched in a plastic bag were impossibly dry. I fought a storm to find her, but it seems she had been placed there to find me. My name is Isla Miller, and I am 36 years old. I have spent the better part of the last decade building a fortress around my life, constructing walls made of silence and distance to keep the chaos of my family at bay. But walls are useless when you willingly open the gate. It started with a vibration on my nightstand at 11:42 at night. I was awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind batter the windows of my apartment in Ketteridge. The storm had been forecasted for days, a massive front sweeping down from Canada, promising to bury the state under 2 feet of snow. When I saw the caller ID, my stomach tightened into a knot that I knew all too well. It was my mother, Denise. I debated letting it go to voicemail. Our relationship had devolved into a transactional rhythm over the years. She called when she needed money, or when she needed to complain about how the world had wronged her, or to guilt me for not being the daughter she had imagined. But the voicemail light never blinked. The phone just kept buzzing, insistent and desperate. I answered. Isla. Her voice was thin, stripped of its usual performative sweetness. It sounded wet and terrified. Isla, I am in trouble. Mom, what is going on? I sat up, pulling the duvet around my shoulders. The draft from the window was biting. My car died, she sobbed. I am at a gas station. I do not know where. It is Pine Hollow, I think, north of the city. The heater is dead. My phone is on 4% battery. Isla, I am so cold. Pine Hollow. That was nearly 200 miles away, deep in the rural belt where the cell service was spotty, even on a clear day. Call a tow truck, Mom, or the police, I said, my voice steady, practicing the detachment I had learned in therapy. I tried, she cried, the wind in the background roaring so loud it clipped the audio. No signal for data. Nobody is answering. There is nobody here. Isla, the station is closed. Please, I have no one else to call. Kara is not picking up. The mention of my sister usually made me bristle, but the sound of that wind was visceral. It did not sound like weather. It sounded like violence. I could hear her teeth chattering, a rapid-fire clicking that you cannot fake. Stay inside the building if you can, I said, already swinging my legs out of bed. It is locked, she wailed. I am standing by the pumps. Please, Isla. The line went dead. I stared at the phone. Logic told me this was insane. Driving 200 miles north into the teeth of a blizzard was suicidal. But the image of my mother, 60 years old, standing in the dark while the temperature dropped to single digits, overrode the logic. I was the reliable one. I was the one who fixed things. It was the role they had assigned me. And despite my best efforts to resign, I showed up for every shift. I dressed in layers, grabbing my heavy parka, a flashlight, and a thermos of coffee I had brewed earlier. I descended to the garage, got into my Subaru, and pulled out into the white hell. The city of Ketteridge was a ghost town. The streetlights were halos in the swirling snow, illuminating nothing but the falling ice. Once I hit the interstate, the world disappeared. There was no sky, no horizon, just a hypnotic tunnel of white flakes rushing toward the windshield. My high beams just reflected off the snow, blinding me, so I drove with low beams, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned the color of parchment. The drive was an endurance test. The heater in my car fought a losing battle against the cold radiating from the glass. Every few miles, a semi-truck would barrel past in the opposite lane, throwing up a wall of slush that momentarily blinded me, leaving me steering by memory and prayer. About an hour into the drive, the isolation began to play tricks on my mind. I checked my rearview mirror. There were headlights behind me. It was a large vehicle, an SUV by the height of the lights. It was following close, too close for these conditions. I tapped my brakes to signal them to back off, but they matched my speed. I accelerated slightly. the tires slipping on a patch of black ice, my heart hammering against my ribs. The lights stayed fixed in my mirror. Two glowing eyes in the storm. For 20 miles, they stayed with me. I felt a primal creep up my spine. The feeling of being hunted. I told myself I was being paranoid. It was a storm. People caravan together for safety. But there was something aggressive about the way it tracked me, mimicking my lane changes. Then, abruptly, near a jagged exit for a logging road, the SUV signaled right and vanished into the dark. I let out a breath I did not realize I had been holding. The absence of the lights made the road feel even lonelier. It took me 4 hours to cover the distance. My eyes burned from the strain. The GPS finally announced I was approaching Pine Hollow. Pine Hollow Fuel was not a place you stopped. It was a place you ended up. It sat off a secondary highway, a relic from a time when this route was busy. As I turned into the lot, the wind buffeted my car, shaking the frame. The station was dismal. A single canopy light flickered with a dying electrical buzz, casting a sickly yellow strobe over the unplowed lot. The snow here was deeper, drifting against the rusted pumps like dunes of white sand. The main building was dark, the windows covered in grime and frost, and there she was. My mother was standing pressed against the brick wall of the kiosk, trying to shield herself from the wind. My headlights swept over her, and the sight stopped my heart. She was not dressed for this. She wore a thin wool coat, the kind you wear to a luncheon, not a blizzard. She had a scarf wrapped around her head, but her legs were clad in dress slacks that were soaked through at the hems. She looked small, fragile. She was shaking so violently I could see it from 20 yards away. But as I pulled closer, my eyes snagged on something that did not fit. She was clutching a plastic grocery bag against her chest. She had her arms wrapped around it tight, burying it inside her open coat. The bag was white and pristine. I put the car in park and shoved the door open. The cold hit me like a physical blow, sucking the air from my lungs. The wind howled, carrying ice crystals that stung my exposed face. "Mom!" I screamed, struggling to keep my footing on the ice. She looked up, her eyes glassy. Her lips were a terrifying shade of violet. She stumbled toward me, stiff-jointed, moving like a marionette with tangled strings. I grabbed her arm. It felt hard, cold as the metal of the gas pump. "Get in the car, now." I looked toward the station window. Inside, behind the glass, I saw movement. A man was standing there, the attendant. He was watching us. He did not look concerned. He did not look like he was about to call 911. He looked bored. He looked at me. Then his eyes slid to my mother, and he gave a slight shake of his head. It was a look of recognition, as if he were thinking, "Here we go again." A shiver that had nothing to do with the temperature rattled down my spine. I shoved my mother into the passenger seat and slammed the door. Running around to the driver's side, I cranked the heat to the maximum setting. "Oh, God," she moaned, her teeth clashing together. "Oh, God, Isla, you came." She huddled toward the vents, her hands shaking uncontrollably. I reached into the back seat and grabbed a wool blanket I kept for emergencies, draping it over her. "Where is your car?" I asked, looking out at the empty lot. "You said your car died?" "They towed it," she stammered, rubbing her hands together. "Just before you got here, a truck came." "In this storm?" I asked. Where did they take it?" "I do not know," she snapped, a flash of her old irritability cutting through the hypothermia. "I do not know. Isla, I was freezing. I was not asking for business cards." I looked at her hands. They were raw and red, but her fingernails were perfect, freshly manicured, a deep burgundy polish, without a single chip, and her hair. She had pulled the scarf down. Her hair was dry. If she had been standing out there for hours, as she claimed, in a blizzard with wind gusts of 40 miles per hour. Her hair should have been matted with snow or damp from the melt. It was perfectly blow-dried, holding its volume. "Mom," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "What is in the bag?" She froze. Her hands stopped rubbing together and clamped down on the white plastic sack in her lap. "Nothing," she said. "Just personal things. My purse got wet." "Your purse is leather," I said. "That is a grocery bag." I reached out. She pulled back, but she was weak from the cold, and I was fueled by adrenaline and a rising, dark suspicion. I grabbed the edge of the bag and pulled it open. Inside, there was no purse. There was no wallet. There were no keys. There was a thick manila envelope. It was completely dry, not a drop of moisture on it. I pulled it out. The paper was heavy stock, professional grade. On the bottom right corner of the top page, embossed into the fiber of the paper, was a circular seal, a notary stamp. My mother looked at me. The violet was fading from her lips as the car warmed up, replaced by a flush of color that looked suspiciously like guilt. "It is just paperwork," she said, her voice trembling, but not from the cold anymore. "Just some things I need to take care of." "You called me saying you were dying," I whispered. "You said you were freezing to death, and you are holding legal documents." She looked away, staring out the window at the swirling snow. "It is complicated. Isla." Kara said, "Look, I just need you to help me." She turned back to me, and the fragility vanished. Her eyes sharpened. It was the look she used when she was cornered, the look that meant she was about to pivot from victim to aggressor. "Since you are here," she said, smoothing the blanket over her knees, "you need to sign this. It is urgent. It cannot wait until morning." I sat back in my seat, the heater blasting hot air into my face, but I felt colder than I had outside. I had driven 200 miles through a blizzard to save her life. I had risked running off the road. I had been terrified. But she had not been waiting to be rescued. She had been waiting for a witness. She had been waiting for a signature. The realization settled in my stomach like a stone. The dry hair, the manicured nails, the towing story that made no sense, the attendant's bored stare. She was not the victim of the storm. She was using the storm. "You want me to sign legal papers," I said, my voice flat. "Here, now, in a gas station parking lot at 3 a.m. "It is for the family," she said, pushing the envelope toward me. "Don't be difficult, Isla. Just sign it so we can go home." I looked at the envelope, then at her. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles popping. "No," I said. "What do you mean?" "No." Her voice rose. "I mean, I am driving you home," I said, putting the car in gear. "But I am not signing anything." I pulled out of the lot, leaving the flickering neon of Pine Hollow behind. My mother sat in silence, clutching the envelope to her chest like a shield. But the air in the car had changed. It was no longer a rescue mission. It was a hostage negotiation, and I had just realized I was the one tied to the chair. The silence in the car as we drove away from Pine Hollow Fuel was heavy, but it was a weight I had been carrying on my shoulders for 36 years. My mother stared out the window at the white tunnel of the storm, clutching her dry envelope, while I navigated the treacherous road with a grim familiarity. I knew this silence. It was the intermission between acts in the long-running drama of the Callahan family. To understand why I was driving through a blizzard for a woman who likely had a heated ride waiting around the corner, you have to understand the ecosystem I escaped from. My childhood home in the suburbs did not raise children. It raised roles. We were cast early, and the director did not tolerate improvisation. My younger sister, Kara, was the golden child. She was the protagonist of every scene. If Kara broke a vase, it was because the vase had been placed precariously by someone else. If Kara failed a math test, the teacher was incompetent. If Kara needed something, the universe and specifically our parents bent to accommodate her gravity. She was bright, loud, and consumed all the oxygen in the room. And then there was me. Isla, the stagehand, the understudy who never got to go on. My role was defined by a single, brutal instruction: figure it out. If I fell off my bike and scraped my knees, I was told to go wash them off and stop crying. If I needed help with homework, I was told my mother was too tired from dealing with Kara's latest crisis. I learned early that my needs were viewed as logistical inconveniences. I was the sturdy furniture in the background of Kara's spotlight. I was expected to be functional, silent, and present only when something heavy needed lifting. This dynamic did not dissolve when we reached adulthood. It calcified. Denise Callahan, my mother, operates on a very specific emotional formula. She is a master of transactional affection. When she needs something money, time, sympathy, or a signature, she is the warmest creature on earth. She becomes the mother you see in fabric softener commercials. She calls you honey, she asks about your day, but the moment the transaction is complete, the moment the check clears or the favor is done, the warmth evaporates, the store closes. She reverts to a distracted, critical acquaintance who looks at you like you are a guest who has overstayed their welcome. I left that house the week after I turned 18. I did not storm out. I did not make a scene. I just packed my bags and went to a state university 4 hours away, funded entirely by loans signed in my own name. I worked double shifts at a diner. I paid my own rent. I built a life that was watertight, devoid of the chaos that flooded my mother's house on a weekly basis. Today, I am a compliance specialist at Meridian Risk Analytics. It is a job that fits my psychology like a tailored glove. I spend my days auditing internal processes, looking for discrepancies, identifying risks, and ensuring that people are following the rules. I am paid to spot the cracks in the foundation before the building collapses. It is ironic, really. I spent my childhood trying to stabilize a house that was always tilting. Now, I do it for a Fortune 500 company, and I am very good at it. My distance from the family was physical, but never fully emotional. I stopped going home for holidays years ago because Thanksgiving was never just about turkey. It was a disguised board meeting for the Family Crisis Fund. Every visit followed the same script. We would eat. Kara would tell a dramatic story about her latest boyfriend or job loss. And then, over dessert, the pivot would happen. Mom would clear her throat. Kara would look at the floor, and they would slide a piece of paper across the table toward me. Isla, we need $3,000 for the roof. Isla, Kara needs a co-signer for her new apartment because her credit score is below 500. Isla, can you put the cable bill in your name? They came to me not because they respected me, but because I was the only one with a resource they lacked stability. I had an 800 credit score. I had a savings account. I had a job title they could put on applications. I was not a daughter to them. I was a guarantor. I was a credit line with a pulse. For years, I played along to keep the peace. I paid the bills. I signed the leases. I told myself it was the price of admission for having a family. But the cost of that ticket went up dramatically 6 months ago. My grandfather, Arthur, passed away in June. He was my father's father. A man made of granite and few words, and the only person in the family who seemed to see me. He watched the dynamic between Kara and me for decades, saying nothing. But his eyes missed nothing. When his will was read, the family gathered in the lawyer's plush office, expecting the standard distribution. Kara was already talking about how she would spend her half of the estate on a trip to Europe, but Arthur had left a final instruction that dropped like a bomb in the center of the room. He left the family cabin, a beautiful, secluded A-frame on 10 acres of woodland near the lake, solely to me. He did not leave it to his son. He did not leave it to his wife, and he certainly did not leave it to Kara. The will was explicit. The property was placed in a trust, with Isla Miller named as the sole trustee and beneficiary. He had added a handwritten note to the file, which the lawyer read aloud with an awkward cough. Because Isla is the only one who will not sell it. The rage in the room was palpable. Kara stormed out. Mom looked at me with a mixture of shock and betrayal, as if I had personally held the pen that wrote the will. That cabin was the only asset of real value left in the family. It was worth nearly $500,000 in the current market. To them, it was a lottery ticket I refused to cash. To me, it was a sanctuary. It was the only place I had ever felt safe. In the 6 months since the funeral, the dynamic shifted from passive exploitation to active siege warfare. Kara suddenly became very interested in my life. She started texting me daily. She asked about the cabin constantly. Was I keeping up with the property taxes? Did I know the insurance premiums were rising? Was it too much work for me to manage alone with my busy job? "Let me help you, Isla," she would say, her voice dripping with faux concern. "I have free time. I can manage the paperwork for you. We can put it in an LLC to save on taxes. I have a friend who knows how to structure it, so you do not have to worry." The words were soft as cotton, but I could feel the steel hook inside them. I work in risk analysis. I know a phishing attempt when I see one. They were trying to get their names on the deed. They were trying to find a legal loophole to pierce the trust my grandfather had set up. I deflected. I ignored. I told them I had it handled. I hired my own accountant. I locked down the digital access to the property records. I thought I was winning. I thought my walls were high enough, but I underestimated their desperation. And I underestimated how far they would go to create a situation where I would be too panicked to think like a compliance specialist. The blizzard was not just weather to them, it was an opportunity. As I drove the Subaru south, the heater finally cutting through the chill in the cabin, I glanced at the envelope in my mother's lap again. I did not need to open it to know what was inside. It was not just paperwork, it was the key to the cabin. They knew I would never sign it over a cup of coffee. They knew I would read every line of fine print if they mailed it to my office. They needed me off balance. They needed me terrified. They needed to manufacture a scenario where my critical thinking was shut down by the primal fear of losing my mother. They staged a scene where Denise Callahan was freezing to death, banking on the fact that despite 36 years of neglect, I still had a daughter's instinct to save her. And they were right. I had driven 200 miles. I had risked my life. I had come for her, but they made one critical error in their calculation. They forgot that I am not just a daughter anymore. I am a professional who finds lies for a living, and the moment I saw that dry notary stamp in a wet plastic bag, I stopped being the daughter they could manipulate. I looked at my mother, who was feigning sleep now, her eyelids fluttering slightly. She looked peaceful, acting the part of the exhausted survivor. "Mom," I said, breaking the silence. My voice was calm, devoid of the panic she expected. She hummed, not opening her eyes. "We are going to a motel," I said. "The roads are too bad to drive all the way back to Kettridge tonight." "A motel." She opened one eye. "Can we not just drive through? I just want to go home, Isla." "No," I said firmly. "I am tired, and I want to take a look at those papers you are holding in better light." I saw her hand tighten on the envelope. A micro-expression of fear flashed across her face before she smoothed it back into exhaustion. "Okay," she whispered. "Whatever you think is best." She thought she had won. She thought the detour was just a delay. She did not realize that by getting into my car, she had entered my jurisdiction, in my world, at Meridian Risk Analytics. When we find a discrepancy, we do not ignore it. We document it. We investigate it. And we do not stop until we find the root cause. I gripped the steering wheel. The wind outside was still screaming, but the storm inside my head had quieted into a cold, hard resolve. I was done keeping the peace. If they wanted a war over this cabin, they were going to get one, but it would not be fought with screaming matches in the kitchen. It would be fought with evidence, timelines, and the very laws they were trying to bypass. I was not the stagehand anymore. I was the auditor, and the audit had just begun. The motel was called the Roadside Inn, a generic box of beige stucco located 3 miles south of the gas station. The neon sign out front was missing the letter O, so it read, "Our Adside Inn," which felt appropriate given the broken nature of the night. I paid for the room with my credit card, ignoring the sleepy glare of the night manager who looked like he had been disturbed from a nap. I requested a room on the ground floor, ostensibly for my mother's convenience, but really because I wanted to be able to leave quickly if the situation deteriorated further. We entered room 104. It smelled of industrial lemon cleaner masking the deeper, permanent scent of stale cigarette smoke. The heating unit under the window rattled to life with a metallic cough. My mother, Denise, immediately sat on the edge of the stiff mattress. She was still shivering, but the violent tremors from the gas station had subsided into a rhythmic, almost performative trembling. What drew my eye, however, was not her shivering, but her grip. Her hands were clamped around that white plastic bag with a force that turned her knuckles white. She had not let go of it once, not when she got out of the car, not when I checked in at the desk, and not now. "You should take a hot shower, Mom," I said, locking the door and sliding the chain into place. "You need to raise your core temperature." "Yes," she said, her voice weak. "Yes, a shower sounds good." She stood up and walked toward the bathroom. At the doorway, she paused. Most people would leave their belongings on the bed or the dresser. My mother took the plastic bag into the bathroom with her. I heard the lock click shut behind her, followed by the sound of the shower curtain rings sliding across the rod. I stood in the center of the room, listening to the water pipes groan. My internal auditor was screaming. The discrepancy count was rising too fast to ignore. I walked over to where she had discarded her coat on the armrest of the single chair. I picked it up. It was a wool blend. Fashionable but impractical. I ran my hands over the fabric. It was damp on the surface. Yes, but the lining was warm. I checked the pockets. Nothing but a used tissue and a tube of lipstick. I looked at the lipstick. I pulled the cap off. It was a pristine shade of coral. I looked at the tissue. A blot of the same coral. She had reapplied her makeup recently. I sat down on the bed she wasn't using and waited. 20 minutes later, the bathroom door opened. My mother emerged, wrapped in a thin white towel, steam billowing out behind her. She had the plastic bag tucked under her arm like a football. "Better?" I asked. "A little," she said, sitting on the bed and tucking her legs under the duvet. "I just need to sleep. Isla, I am so tired." She reached up to brush a strand of hair from her face, and that was when the first major tumbler in the lock clicked into place for me. Her fingernails. I had been too panicked at the gas station to look closely, but under the harsh fluorescent light of the motel room, they were impossible to miss. They were perfect, a deep, glossy burgundy, not a chip, not a scratch, not a single broken cuticle. I thought about the scenario she had described, a car breaking down in a blizzard, standing outside in freezing wind, banging on the hood, trying to open a frozen door handle, digging around in a trunk. Any of those actions would have wreaked havoc on a fresh manicure. Yet her hands looked like they had just left a salon, and her hair, she had just showered, but she hadn't washed it. She had used a shower cap, obviously, but even before the shower, back in the car, her hair had been voluminous, blow-dried. If she had been outside for hours as she claimed, the humidity of the snow and the violence of the wind would have collapsed any hairstyle. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice casual, "what happened to your car exactly? We need to figure out where the tow truck took it so we can call them in the morning." She stiffened slightly under the duvet. "I told you. A truck came. The driver said he would take it to the nearest garage." "Which garage?" I asked. "There is nothing out here for 30 miles. "I do not know the name." "Isla," she snapped, rubbing her temples. "I was freezing. I just gave him the keys." "He didn't give you a receipt," I pressed. "A claim ticket, a business card." "No," she said. "He said he would email it to me. I gave him my email address." "You gave a tow truck driver your email address in the middle of a blizzard while you were hypothermic?" I asked. "And he typed it into what, a tablet?" "Stop interrogating me," she said, pulling the blanket up to her chin. "Why do you always have to pick everything apart? I am safe. That is what matters." She turned away from me, curling into a ball around her plastic bag. I waited until her breathing evened out. I knew she wasn't asleep. Her breathing was too controlled, lacking the heavy rhythm of true exhaustion, but she was pretending, and that was enough for me. "I am going to the vending machine," I said quietly. She didn't move. I grabbed my keys and slipped out of the room. I didn't go to the vending machine. I got into my Subaru and drove back to the gas station. The storm was letting up, the snow turning into a fine, glittering dust in the headlights. The drive took less than 10 minutes. When I pulled into Pine Hollow Fuel, the station was exactly as I had left it, desolate, windswept, and eerie. I parked and walked up to the kiosk window. The attendant was still there, a man in his 50s with gray stubble and eyes that looked like they had seen too many long nights. He was watching a portable television on the counter. He looked up as I tapped on the glass. He recognized me. He didn't look happy about it. He slid the tray drawer open, the only way to communicate through the bulletproof glass. "Forget something?" he asked. His voice was gravelly. "My mother," I said. "The woman I picked up. She is confused about her car. She said a tow truck took it." The attendant frowned. He took a sip from a styrofoam cup. "Ain't no tow truck been here tonight, lady." My stomach dropped, but I kept my face neutral. "Are you sure? She said it happened right before I got here." "I been here since 6 o'clock, he said. "Only truck that came through was a salty spreader for the highway department. No tow trucks, no broken down cars neither." "She said her car died," I said. "She was standing right out there." The man laughed, a short, dry bark. "She wasn't standing out there. She was standing inside, right here in the lobby, drinking coffee." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Inside, she told me the door was locked." "I locked it after she went out to meet you," he said. "She waited in here for, I don't know, 40 minutes. Nice lady? Chatty?" "She was alone," I asked. The attendant paused. He looked at me, realizing he might have said too much. But the boredom and the late hour loosened his tongue. "Nah," he said. "She wasn't alone when she got here. Another car dropped her off. Big black SUV. They sat in the lot for a while with the engine running. Then the young girl came in with her, bought her a coffee, and left. Said her mom was waiting for a ride." The young girl. Kara. "Thank you," I whispered. "You possess a good night," he said, sliding the drawer shut. I walked back to my car, my legs feeling like lead. I sat in the driver's seat, the engine idling. I needed to see it. I needed visual confirmation. My Subaru is equipped with a high-end dashcam system, front and rear. It records on a loop. I pulled the small screen down and navigated the menu with trembling fingers. I rewound the footage to the moment I arrived at the station 2 hours and 14 minutes ago, on the small, grainy screen. I saw the tunnel of snow as I approached the station. I saw my headlights sweep across the empty pumps. And then, just as I was turning into the entrance, on the far right edge of the frame, I saw it. It was blurry, obscured by the falling snow, but it was unmistakable. A dark vehicle, large and boxy, was pulling out of the side exit of the gas station lot, slipping onto the dark country road without turning on its headlights until it was 100 yards away. It was the same SUV that had followed me, the one that had vanished at the logging road. Kara hadn't just dropped Mom off. She had waited. She had tailed me to make sure I was coming. She had coordinated the timing so that Mom would be outside, looking pathetic and frozen, exactly when my headlights hit the lot. It was a stage play, a precisely choreographed piece of theater designed to extract a signature from me. I drove back to the motel in a daze. The anger I felt wasn't the hot, explosive kind. It was cold. It was the temperature of liquid nitrogen. It clarified everything. When I entered the room, the lights were still on. My mother was asleep, or doing a very convincing impression of it. She was lying on her back, mouth slightly open. The plastic bag was tucked under the pillow, the edge of the envelope sticking out just an inch. Her phone was on the nightstand next to her head. It was plugged into the wall charger I had left there. I walked over to the bed. I moved silently, a habit from years of trying not to wake her when I came home late from shifts at the diner. I stood over her, looking at the woman who had birthed me. I looked for love in my heart, for sympathy. I found only a dull, aching void. Her phone screen lit up. The sudden light in the dark room made me jump, but I didn't make a sound. A text message had just arrived. I leaned closer. The font was large. My mother had set the text size to the maximum for her eyesight. I didn't even have to touch the phone to read it. The sender was Carousel, The time was 1:12 in the morning. The message read, "Stick to the script. Do not push her too hard tonight. Just get the POA signed in the morning. POA, power of attorney." The air left my lungs. They didn't just want the cabin. A power of attorney was the nuclear option. It would give them control over everything. My bank accounts, my investments, my decisions. If the wording was broad enough, they could dismantle my entire financial life and transfer the cabin into their names without me even being in the room. My hand moved instinctively to my pocket. I pulled out my own phone. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard, I thought it would wake her. My fingers felt numb. I opened my camera app. I hovered my phone over hers. I tapped the screen to focus. The image on her screen was crisp. Stick to the script. I took the photo. The artificial shutter sound of my phone was disabled. But the motion must have disturbed her. Or maybe she sensed my presence. My mother's eyes snapped open. For a second, there was no recognition. Just the blank stare of a sleeper. Then her eyes darted to my hand, holding my phone over hers. She saw the lit screen of her own device. She sat up with a speed that defied her age and her alleged exhaustion. She snatched her phone off the nightstand, clutching it to her chest. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice shrill. "You got a text," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant, robotic. I thought it might be important. She looked at the screen, reading the message I had just captured. Her face went pale, then red. She looked up at me, and I saw the gears turning. She forced a laugh, a brittle, high-pitched sound that bounced off the cheap motel walls. "Oh, this," she waved the hand holding the phone. "This is just Kara being Kara. She worries. She is joking. You know how she talks. Script? It is just a figure of speech." "A figure of speech," I repeated. "Yes," she said, her voice gaining confidence as she committed to the lie. "You are so suspicious. Isla, you always have been. You think everyone is out to get you. I just nearly died in a snowstorm, and you are spying on my text messages." She swung her legs out of bed, moving to tuck the phone into her purse, no, into the plastic bag. "Go to sleep, Isla," she said, turning her back to me. "You are imagining things." I looked at her back. I looked at the plastic bag. I looked at the phone in my hand, where the image of the text message was safely stored in my gallery. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I didn't tell her about the gas station attendant, or the dashcam footage, or the perfect manicure. "You are right," I said softly. "I am tired. We should sleep." I walked over to the other bed and sat down. I turned off the lamp. In the darkness, I listened to her breathing settle. She thought she had deflected me. She thought I was the same Isla who used to apologize for existing. She thought she was safe. She was wrong. I lay back on the pillow, my eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. I was not imagining things. I was collecting data. And the audit was no longer just an investigation. It was building a case. From this moment forward, I decided, nothing happens off the record. Every word, every text, every document, I would record it all. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, waiting for the sun to rise, and with it, the second act of their play. I was ready to learn my lines. The morning sun hit the dirty window of the motel room with a brilliance that felt mocking. I had been awake since 4 in the morning, watching the dust motes dance in the sliver of light that cut through the curtains, while my mother snored with a rhythm that suggested her hypothermia had miraculously resolved itself during the night. The room felt smaller in the daylight, the beige walls closing in like the sides of a cardboard box. At 8:15, there was a sharp, confident knock on the door. It was not the hesitant tap of housekeeping. It was the percussive demand of someone who believed they owned the building. I did not need to check the peephole to know who it was, but I did anyway. Kara was standing on the concrete walkway. She looked like she had stepped out of a catalog for young professionals who hike on weekends. She wore a pristine North Face jacket, designer jeans, and boots that had clearly never touched mud. She was balancing a cardboard tray of coffees in one hand and a bag of bagels in the other. Standing just behind her, slightly out of focus, was a man I did not recognize. He was short, balding, and wore a gray suit that fit him poorly around the shoulders. He clutched a leather briefcase to his chest, as if it contained nuclear codes. I unlocked the door and opened it. "Isla?" Kara gasped, pushing past me before I could even say hello. The scent of vanilla latte and expensive perfume flooded the stale room. "Oh my God. I was so worried. I drove up as soon as I saw Mom's text. How is she?" It was a performance worthy of an award. If I hadn't seen her SUV leaving the gas station on my dashcam 6 hours ago, I might have believed the tremor in her voice. "She is sleeping," I said, closing the door. The room was now crowded. The man in the suit stepped inside and stood awkwardly by the television stand. "Who is this?" I asked, gesturing to him. "This is Mr. Henderson," Kara said, setting the coffee tray down on the rickety table. "He is a mobile notary. I picked him up on the way. I figured since we are all here, we should just get the paperwork handled so Mom doesn't have to worry about it later." "A mobile notary," I repeated. "You brought a notary to a motel room at 8 in the morning." "I like to be efficient," Kara said, flashing a tight smile. She moved to the bed and gently shook Mom's shoulder. Mommy, wake up. I brought coffee." My mother stirred, groaning theatrically. She sat up, clutching the duvet to her chest, and looked from Kara to me to Mr. Henderson. She did not look surprised to see a stranger in her bedroom. "Kara," Mom sighed, reaching out a hand. "You came." "Of course I came," Kara said, squeezing her hand. Then she turned to me, and her face shifted. The warmth vanished, replaced by a mask of grave concern. "Isla, we have a problem," Kara said. "I spoke to Dr. Evans on the phone while I was driving up. He said with Mom's history of circulation issues, this exposure to the cold could have long-term complications. She might need hospitalization. She might need rehab." "She looks fine," I said, leaning against the wall, crossing my arms. "She slept for 6 hours." "Internal damage is silent," Kara countered quickly. "The point is, if she goes into the hospital, her accounts freeze. We won't be able to pay her bills. We won't be able to manage the house. We need to be proactive." She reached into the inner pocket of her jacket, not the bag Mom had been guarding, but her own coat, and pulled out a stapled document. It was thick. "I had my lawyer draft this up last night," Kara said. "It is a standard power of attorney. It just lets us handle her affairs while she recovers. Since you are the oldest and the one with the finance job, Mom wants you to be the primary agent. I will just be the secondary." She handed the document to me. I took it. The paper felt heavy. I walked over to the window to get better light. Mr. Henderson unzipped his briefcase and pulled out a large, heavy stamp and a black ink pad. He placed them on the table with a dull thud. "Standard power of attorney," I muttered. Flipping the first page, I began to read. In my job at Meridian Risk Analytics, I read contracts all day. I know what standard looks like. This was not it. This was a monster. It was a durable power of attorney, effective immediately upon signature. That part was normal enough, but the powers granted were terrifyingly broad. Clause 4. Authority to conduct real estate transactions, including the sale, transfer, or encumbrance of any property owned by the principal or held in trust for the principal. Clause 7. Authority to change beneficiary designations on all insurance policies and retirement accounts. Clause 12. Unlimited gifting authority to descendants. I stopped at Clause 12. Unlimited gifting authority. That meant the agent could legally take money or assets out of my mother's name and give them to herself, or in this case, give them to descendants. If I signed this, I would be giving myself the power to give everything to Kara. But why did they need me to sign it? Why not just have Mom sign it and make Kara the agent? Then I turned to the back page, and I understood. There was a section for co-trustee consent, the cabin. My grandfather's cabin was in a trust. I was the trustee. But there was a provision in the trust, I remembered it clearly, that said if the beneficiary me became incapacitated or acted against the interest of the estate, the family could petition for a change of control. This document wasn't just a power of attorney for Mom. Buried in the legalese on page 9 was a clause that appointed Kara as the guardian of the estate in the event of any legal dispute, and there was an indemnity clause. By signing this, I would be waiving my right to sue for any actions taken under this authority. This allows the agent to sell real estate, I said, looking up, and it allows for unlimited gifting. Standard boilerplate. Mr. Henderson spoke up for the first time. His voice was oily, like a car salesman trying to move a lemon off the lot. It just gives you flexibility, ma'am. Better to have it and not need it, right? Why are we doing this here? I asked, looking at Kara. If Mom is really sick, we should be at the hospital. Hospitals have social workers and patient advocates. They have notaries on staff. We can do this there, with witnesses. Hospitals are a nightmare, Kara said, waving her hand dismissively. Red tape, waiting periods, doctors asking stupid questions. Look, Mr. Henderson charges $200 an hour, and he is here now. Just sign it. Isla, stop making everything a federal case. $200 an hour. I raised an eyebrow. You are paying a notary $200 an hour to come to a roadside motel, but Mom couldn't afford a tow truck last night. I am putting it on my credit card, Kara snapped, because I care about Mom. Mom looked at me from the bed. She had pulled her knees up, making herself look small. She gave me that look, the one that had controlled me for 3 decades. The eyes were wide, watery, and filled with a weaponized disappointment. Isla, she whispered, please, I just want to know everything is taken care of. I don't want to lose the house. If I get sick, I just need you to help me. Why is it always a fight with you? That sentence, why is it always a fight with you? It was the trigger phrase designed to make me fold. It was designed to make me feel like the aggressor, the difficult one, the ungrateful child. My chest tightened. The room felt suffocating. The smell of the coffee was making me nauseous. I am not signing this right now, I said, lowering the papers. Excuse me, Kara stepped forward, invading my personal space. I said I am not signing it. I repeated, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I need to read the whole thing, and I want to run it by a lawyer. A lawyer! Kara laughed, a harsh barking sound. We don't have time for a lawyer. Isla, it is the weekend. Mom could have a stroke in an hour. We need this active now. Then let her sign a limited medical proxy, I said. I will draft one up on a napkin right now. It will let you talk to doctors, but I am not signing a durable power of attorney that lets you liquidate assets. You think I want to steal her money? Kara shouted. Her face was turning pink. You think I am some kind of thief? I am her daughter. I am the one who takes care of her while you are off in the city playing corporate hotshot. I think this document is dangerous, I said, and I think it is strange that you are pushing it so hard. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. Ladies, I do have another appointment at 10 o'clock. If we could expedite this. Just sign the damn paper. Isla, Kara screamed. I looked at the document in my hand. I looked at the notary seal sitting on the table, the stamp that would make this nightmare legal. I will tell you what, I said. Let me go to the front desk. I will photocopy this entire packet. I will take a copy for my records, and I will read it over lunch, if I feel comfortable. We can meet this afternoon and sign it. Kara froze. Her reaction was instantaneous and visceral. She snatched the papers out of my hand. No, she said. Why not? I asked. If it is standard boilerplate, what is the harm in me having a copy to read? Because it contains sensitive personal information, Kara stammered. Social security numbers, bank accounts. I don't want that floating around a motel front desk. I am a compliance specialist, I said. I handle confidential data for a living. I know how to use a copier. I said no. Kara shoved the papers into her bag. She was breathing hard. The silence that followed was deafening. By refusing to let me copy the document, she had just confirmed everything. If the document was legitimate, a copy wouldn't matter. But if it was a trap, if there were pages in there that would be swapped out, or clauses that would be used to destroy me, she couldn't risk me having evidence of the original draft. Mr. Henderson looked at his watch, suddenly very interested in the carpet. I need 24 hours, I said. My voice was cold steel. I am not signing anything today. I will take Mom home. I will get her settled. And tomorrow, we can discuss legal arrangements, in an office, with proper counsel. Kara stared at me. Her eyes were slits. She was calculating. She realized she had pushed too hard. The damsel in distress narrative had failed. The medical emergency narrative had failed. She needed to regroup. Fine, Kara spat. 24 hours. But if Mom has a heart attack because of the stress you are causing her, that is on you. Isla, you write that down in your little compliance log. Her blood is on your hands. I can live with that, I said. Kara turned to Mom. Get dressed. Mom, I am taking you home, clearly. Isla is too busy protecting her assets to care about you. I thought her car was towed, I asked. How are you getting her home and dealing with the tow truck? I will handle it, Kara said, grabbing Mom's coat and throwing it at her. Like I handle everything. I watched them pack. It took 3 minutes. Mom didn't look at me. She moved with the obedience of a soldier who had failed her mission and was retreating to the barracks. Mr. Henderson zipped up his bag. Do I still get the travel fee? He asked Kara. Shut up, Kara hissed. They marched out of the room. I stood in the doorway and watched them go. They got into the black SUV, the same one from the gas station, the same one from the highway. As they drove away, kicking up slush from the parking lot, I felt a strange sensation. It wasn't relief. It was clarity. They had shown their hand. They had brought a weapon into the room. That document was a loaded gun aimed at my future. They had tried to make me pull the trigger on myself. I went back inside the room and closed the door. I didn't pack immediately. I sat down at the small table where the notary had been sitting. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app. Item 1. The document contained a gifting clause. Item 2. Kara refused to allow a photocopy. Item 3. The notary was paid for speed, not verification. I had 24 hours. They thought I was using the time to cool off, to feel guilty, to eventually cave in like I always did. They were wrong. I wasn't going to use the time to cool off. I was going to use it to burn their plan to the ground. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and walked out of the motel. I had a lot of phone calls to make, and I needed to be in a place where the walls didn't have ears. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, 3 towns over from where I had left my mother and sister. The engine was running to keep the heat on, but the warmth I felt had nothing to do with the climate control. It was the cold, focused heat of a professional entering a crisis management phase. I was done reacting. I was done being the daughter who scrambled to fix things. I was now the auditor, and the Callahan family was the entity under investigation. I opened my laptop, tethered it to my phone's hotspot, and began to build my case. My first call was to the North Haven Legal Group. I had done some quick research while driving. They specialized in elder law and estate litigation, but more importantly, they had a reputation for aggressive asset protection. It was Saturday, but their website boasted a 24/7 emergency consultation line. A junior associate named Mr. Reynolds picked up. He sounded young, eager, and expensive. I did not waste time with pleasantries. I explained the situation with the precision of a police report, the blizzard, the staged rescue, the dry documents, the pressure to sign a durable power of attorney with gifting clauses. I need you to look at something, I said, my voice steady. I am sending you a secure email right now. I attached the photo of the text message I had captured from my mother's phone stick to the script, and a picture of the power of attorney document I had managed to snap a few blurry shots of while Kara was arguing with the notary. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the clicking of a mouse as he zoomed in on the images. Ms. Miller, Reynolds said, his tone shifting from professional curiosity to alarm. This is not a standard estate planning situation. That text message implies conspiracy. And this power of attorney clause 12 is a license to steal. If you had signed this, they could have legally transferred the title of your cabin to themselves by the end of the business day Monday. They wouldn't even need to sell it. They could just gift it. I thought so, I said. But why the rush? Why the snowstorm? Why not just pressure me at Christmas? Because panic overrides due diligence, Reynolds replied. But there is usually a second factor. Urgency often implies a deadline on their end. Have you checked your credit report recently? I felt a chill that cut through my coat. No, not in a month. Check it, he advised. Right now, while I'm on the line. I opened a new tab. My fingers flew across the keys. I logged into my credit monitoring service. The dashboard loaded, displaying my score still an 810. Thank God. But then I clicked on the Recent Inquiries tab. My breath hitched. There, sitting at the top of the list, dated 3 days ago, was a hard inquiry from Summit Crest Lending. Status pending application. I found it, I whispered. Summit Crest Lending. I never applied for a loan with them. Is there a dollar amount? Reynolds asked. I clicked into the details. $175,000. Home equity line of credit. Collateral listed the cabin address. The pieces slammed together. They weren't just trying to get the title. They had already applied for a loan against the cabin using my name. They had likely forged my signature on the application. But to close the deal to actually get the cash released, they needed a notarized confirmation of identity or a power of attorney that would allow them to sign the closing documents on my behalf. That was why the mobile notary was there. That was why the papers were in the bag. They needed to walk into a bank on Monday morning with a document saying they were me, or at least that they had the power to act as me, to collect a check for nearly $200,000. This is robbery by signature, Reynolds said flatly. They are trying to leverage an asset you own to pay themselves, leaving you with the debt. If they default, the bank takes your cabin. What do I do? I asked. Do I call the police? We will, Reynolds said. But we need more than suspicion. We need to catch them in the act of trying to execute the fraud. If you go to the police now, it is a civil dispute between family members. They will say it was a misunderstanding. We need to prove intent. I have the text message, I said. Good, but not enough. We need to link the loan to them directly. I hung up with Reynolds after retaining him. The retainer fee was $3,000, which I paid without blinking. It was an investment in my freedom. Next, I called my own bank. The automated system took 5 minutes to navigate, but finally, I got a human in the fraud department. I am calling to verify my contact information. I told the representative, I have a suspicion that someone may have tampered with my profile. One moment, Ms. Miller, the woman said. I see here that an address change request was processed 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks. I did not make that request, I said, my hand gripping the steering wheel. What is the new address? She read out a P.O. box in a town 10 miles from where my mother lived. And, she added, a request was made to send replacement debit cards to that address. They were mailed out last Monday. Cancel them, I commanded. Freeze everything. Put a verbal password on the account. No one accesses anything unless they say the word winter. Done, she said. I leaned back in the seat. They had been planning this for weeks. The freezing mother in the snowstorm wasn't an act of desperation. It was the climax of a month-long operation. They had stolen my identity, applied for loans, and diverted my mail. The only thing they couldn't fake was the final notarized signature required by the lender for a 6-figure payout. The bag my mother had been holding, the dry bag, it wasn't just a prop to make her look pathetic. It was a file folder for the bank. She was guarding it with her life because it contained the loan application and the forged documents they had already prepared. I started the car. I had one more stop to make before I set the trap. I drove back to Pine Hollow. The sun was high now, the snow melting into dirty slush. The gas station looked less ominous in the daylight, just a run-down stop on a lonely highway. I walked inside. The attendant from the night shift was gone, replaced by a younger man playing a video game on his phone. "I need to speak to the owner," I said. "He's in the back," the kid mumbled without looking up. I walked to the office door and knocked hard. A heavy-set man opened it, looking annoyed. "We ain't hiring," he grunted. "I am not looking for a job," I said. Pulling out my business card from Meridian Risk Analytics, it looked impressive embossed text. Corporate logo. "I am investigating a potential insurance fraud case involving an incident on your property last night. I need a copy of your surveillance footage from the hours of 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. The owner looked at the card, then at me. "I don't have to give you nothing without a warrant." "That is true," I said calmly. "You don't, but if I have to get a subpoena, my legal department will also include a request to inspect your pump calibration records and your tank maintenance logs while we are at it. We are very thorough when we are inconvenienced." It was a bluff. I had no authority to inspect his pumps. But men like this always had something to hide, and the threat of a corporate audit was terrifying. He stared at me for a long moment, chewing on a toothpick. Then he stepped back. "Take it," he said, gesturing to the monitor system. "Just don't mess up my settings." It took me 20 minutes to locate the files and export them to a USB drive I kept on my keychain. The footage was crystal clear. It showed the black SUV pulling in. It showed Kara and my mother sitting in the car for 40 minutes, eating fast food. It showed Kara checking her watch, then helping my mother out of the car, positioning her by the wall, and driving off just moments before my headlights appeared on the road. It was cold-blooded. It was undeniable. I pocketed the USB drive. "Thank you for your cooperation." I got back in my car. I had the lawyer. I had the financial trail. I had the video evidence. I had the police report number I had stopped by the local precinct on the way and filed a report for informational purposes regarding identity theft, just to create a timestamp in the government database. Now, I needed to bring them out into the open. I looked at my phone. It had been 6 hours since I left the motel. Kara had sent 3 texts. "Kara, you are being unreasonable. Kara, Mom is crying. She thinks you hate her. Kara, we can't wait forever. Isla." I took a deep breath. I typed a reply. I made sure my tone was defeated. The tone of the worn-down sister they knew and exploited. Me. "You are right. I am sorry. I was just scared and tired. I don't want Mom to lose the house or be sick without help." I waited a minute. Then I sent the second part. Me. "I will sign the papers, but I want to do it properly so the bank doesn't reject it later. Since the loan is with Summit Crest, let's just meet at their branch office in Oakville tomorrow morning. We can sign everything there with their notary. It will look more official." I held my breath. I had named the lender. If they were innocent, they would ask, "What loan?" or "Why Summit Crest?" But if they were guilty, they would see this as a victory. They would think I had figured out the plan and capitulated, or that I was just choosing a convenient location. Either way, meeting at the lender's office would save them a step. It was the path of least resistance. The 3 dots appeared immediately. "Kara, finally. Thank you for coming to your senses. Oakville branch at 10 a.m. Don't be late." She didn't ask how I knew about Summit Crest. She didn't ask why I chose that specific bank. She just took the bait. I stared at the screen. "Finally," she had written. "Finally," I said aloud to the empty car. I put the car in gear. I had a long drive to Oakville. I needed to meet with a loan officer before they arrived. I needed to set the stage. The script was mine now. The strategy my lawyer, Mr. Reynolds, outlined was known as controlled acquiescence. It is a term we use in risk management when we want a bad actor to continue their behavior within a specific, monitored perimeter so we can gather enough evidence to bury them. The trap has to look like a door. It has to look like the easiest way out. "Do not fight them on the meeting," Reynolds had told me over the phone. "If they want to sign at the lender's office, that is actually perfect. It puts them on federal jurisdiction soil. It puts them on camera. And it brings the bank's own compliance team into the fight on your side." So, I prepared the stage. I called Summit Crest Lending at 9 o'clock sharp on Monday morning. I did not ask for customer service. I asked for the fraud prevention unit. When I got a mid-level manager on the line, I used the specific terminology of my trade. I spoke about synthetic identity elements, unauthorized credit inquiries, and potential elder abuse involving coerced surety. I was transferred immediately to the regional risk manager, a man named Mr. Sterling. I met Sterling 2 hours later at a coffee shop across the street from his branch in Oakville. He was a sharp-featured man who listened more than he spoke. I laid out the timeline, the staged emergency in the snow, the pending loan application I had found on my credit report, the mail diversion, and the text message instructing my mother to stick to the script. "I am not asking you to cancel the application yet," I told him, sipping my black coffee. "I am asking you to let them come in on Friday. They believe I am coming to sign the final authorization as a guarantor. I want to proceed with the appointment." Sterling looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "You want to set up a sting operation in my conference room." "I want to verify the identity of the applicants," I corrected him, using his own bank's policy language. "If my mother and sister are attempting to defraud your institution using my credentials and a coerced senior citizen, wouldn't you prefer to stop it before the funds are released?" Sterling tapped his pen on the table. "Friday at 10 in the morning, I will have my compliance officer present, and I will ask our off-duty security detail to be in the lobby." "Thank you," I said. "And one more thing. I am hiring a private investigator to document their arrival and departure. He will be sitting right here, in this window. I just want you to know so your security doesn't flag him." Sterling nodded slowly. "You are very thorough. Ms. Miller." "I have to be," I said. The private investigator was a man named Mr. Vance, a referral from Reynolds. He was expensive, costing me $150 an hour, but he was invisible. I needed him for one reason: to prove that Kara and my mother were coordinating this when they thought no one was watching. I needed footage of them in the parking lot, their demeanor before they put on their masks for the bank. With the trap set, I returned to the data I had extracted from the gas station. I sat in my home office, the curtains drawn, and plugged the USB drive into my laptop. I had watched the footage once before to confirm the timeline, but now I watched it with the eye of a prosecutor. I played the file marked 2200 hours. The black SUV pulled into the empty lot. It parked near the air pump, away from the main lights. The engine remained running. I zoomed in, through the passenger window, illuminated by the dashboard lights. I could see them. My mother and Kara. They were not arguing. They were not in distress. My mother was eating a burger, holding it with both hands. Kara was saying something, gesturing with a French fry. And then, my mother threw her head back. She was laughing. I paused the video. I stared at the pixelated image of my mother's face. She was laughing. 40 minutes before she called me, claiming to be freezing to death, claiming to be abandoned. She was sitting in a warm car with her golden child, sharing a meal and a joke. I felt a crack forming in my chest, a deep fissure in the foundation of who I thought I was. I had always believed my mother was weak. I had believed she was a victim of her own incompetence, a woman who needed saving. But you do not laugh like that if you are a victim. You laugh like that if you are an accomplice. I pressed play. I watched Kara check her watch. I watched her point to the door. I watched my mother wipe her mouth, check her hair in the visor mirror, and then step out of the car. She stood by the wall. Kara waited until my mother gave a thumbs up, then reversed the car and drove out of the frame. My mother stood there for 10 minutes before I arrived. She adjusted her scarf. She practiced shivering. She looked at the road, waiting for my headlights. It was not just a lie. It was a production, and my mother was not a prop. She was the lead actress. I closed the laptop. I needed one more nail for the coffin. I pulled up the photo I had taken of the notary's stamp at the motel. Thomas Henderson, Notary Public, County of Westchester. I went to the Secretary of State's website and searched the licensing database. I typed in the commission number visible on the stamp. No records found. I searched the name. There was a Thomas Henderson, but his commission had expired 4 years ago, and he was registered in a completely different county The man in the motel room had been using a fake stamp. This elevated the situation from familial manipulation to criminal fraud, forgery, impersonation of a public official. I printed the screenshot. Now came the hardest part of the plan. I had brought my mother back to my apartment in the city to recover. It was the only way to ensure she would be at the bank on Friday, and the only way to separate her from Kara's immediate coaching. But having her in my space was like living with a ghost who wouldn't stop complaining. I had established ground rules the moment she walked through my door. "You are sick," I told her. "You said you were hypothermic, so you are going to rest, no visitors, and I'm keeping the environment low stress. So I am taking your phone." "You can't take my phone," she had snapped, her eyes narrowing. "I can," I said, holding out my hand. "Or I can take you to the emergency room and have you admitted for observation. If you are as sick as you said you were, you belong in a hospital. If you are well enough to fight me, then you are well enough to explain to the police why you lied about the car accident." She handed over the phone. I also took her purse. I locked everything: her ID, her credit cards, the phone, and the dry bag of documents in my gun safe bolted to the floor of my closet. For 2 days, my apartment was a battlefield of silence and passive aggression. My mother paced the living room. She tried every emotional key on her ring to unlock me. "You have become so hard, Isla," she said on Wednesday evening, standing in the doorway of the kitchen while I chopped vegetables. "I remember when you were a little girl. You were so sweet. You used to bring me dandelions." "I am 36, Mom," I said, not looking up from the cutting board. "I raised you," she said, her voice trembling. "I gave up everything for you and your sister, and now, when I need a little help, you treat me like a prisoner." "I am treating you like a guest," I said. "You have food, you have heat, you have a bed. That is more than you had at the gas station. Why won't you just sign the papers?" she pleaded, switching tactics instantly. "Kara says if we don't sign by Friday, the opportunity is gone. We could lose everything." "What opportunity?" I asked. "The loan." She froze. "I didn't say loan, I said the arrangement." "We are going to the bank on Friday," I said calmly. "We will sign whatever needs to be signed. You don't have to worry. Really." Her face lit up. It was pathetic how quickly she pivoted from grief to greed. "Yes," I said. "We will settle everything on Friday." She didn't know that settle meant 2 very different things to us. On Thursday night, I caught her using the landline in the guest room. I had forgotten to disconnect it. She was whispering, her back turned to the door. "She agreed," my mother whispered. "Yes, 10 in the morning. No, she doesn't suspect. She's just being controlling. As usual. Okay, see you there." She hung up and turned around. When she saw me standing there, she jumped. "Just checking in with Kara," she said, smoothing her sweater. She was worried. "I am sure she was," I said. I didn't get angry. I didn't scream. I just looked at her with a profound sense of pity. She was 60 years old, and she was still playing the role of the helpless damsel, unaware that the script had been rewritten without her knowledge. She had agreed to freeze in a snowstorm for money. She had agreed to betray the one child who had actually shown up for her. "Get some sleep, Mom," I said. "Tomorrow is a big day." Friday morning broke with a sky that was painfully blue. The storm had passed, leaving the world scrubbed clean and bright. The snow was melting, dripping from the eaves in a steady rhythm that sounded like a ticking clock. I dressed in my best suit, charcoal gray, sharp lines, commanding. I dressed my mother in a warm coat I had bought for her, because I refused to let her look like a victim today. "Where are my papers?" she asked, as we walked to the car. "The bag." "I have it," I said, patting my leather briefcase. "It is safe." We drove to Oakville in silence. My mother stared out the window, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. She thought she was being driven to a victory lap. She thought the hard part was over. I pulled into the parking lot of Summit Crest Lending at 9:55 in the morning. Kara's black SUV was already there, parked in the front row. She was leaning against the hood, wearing a trench coat and oversized sunglasses, looking like she owned the building. The man who had played the notary, Mr. Henderson, was standing next to her, looking significantly more nervous than he had at the motel. Mr. Vance, my investigator, was sitting in the window of the coffee shop across the street. I saw him lift his coffee cup, the signal that his camera was rolling. "There she is," Mom said, unbuckling her seatbelt before I had even fully stopped. "Oh, thank goodness." I unlocked the doors. My mother scrambled out, rushing toward Kara like a moth to a flame. Kara hugged her, then looked over Mom's shoulder at me. She smirked. It was a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. I stepped out of the car. The air was crisp. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cold, clean oxygen. "Do you have the papers?" Kara called out. "I have everything we need," I said, lifting my briefcase. "Good," Kara said, linking her arm through Mom's. "Let's get this over with. Mr. Henderson is on the clock." "Actually," I said, walking toward the glass doors of the bank, "we won't need Mr. Henderson. The bank insists on using their own notary for transactions of this size." Kara frowned. "That is ridiculous. Mr. Henderson is already here." "Bank policy?" I lied smoothly. "Unless you want to reschedule." Kara gritted her teeth. "Fine, whatever. Let's just go inside." She dismissed Henderson with a wave of her hand. He looked relieved and scurried toward his own car. It didn't matter. I already had his license plate number, and Vance was recording his departure. I held the door open for my mother and sister. "After you," I said. They walked into the lobby of Summit Crest Lending. They walked past the security guard, who gave me a subtle nod. They walked toward the conference room where Mr. Sterling and his compliance team were waiting. They walked into the trap, believing it was the exit, and for the first time in my life, I followed them not to clean up their mess, but to lock the door behind them. The walk from my car to the glass doors of Summit Crest Lending took less than a minute, but the road to get there had been paved with 48 hours of absolute psychological warfare. To understand why I walked into that bank without a tremor in my hands, you have to understand the siege I had endured since leaving the motel. It began on Tuesday, shortly after I brought my mother back to my apartment. Kara realized that her initial blitzkrieg attack at the motel had failed. I had not signed the papers. I had asked for time. To a narcissist like Kara, a delay is not a pause. It is a declaration of war. And since she could not physically force my hand, she decided to break my spirit using the only weapon she had left: shame. She activated the family network. My phone began to vibrate on Tuesday afternoon. At first, it was subtle. A text from an aunt I had not spoken to in 3 years. "Isla, I heard about your mother. I am praying for her." Then, the tone shifted. The messages became more frequent and more aggressive. Kara had clearly spun a narrative that I was not the rescuer, but the villain. She had told them I was holding our sick mother hostage, refusing to sign the paperwork that would pay for her urgent medical care. My cousin, a man who still owed me $500 from a decade ago, sent a text that read, "I cannot believe you are letting Aunt Denise suffer like this. You were always cold. But this is sick. She nearly died in that storm." Another from my uncle. "Do the right thing. Isla, stop thinking about your inheritance and start thinking about your mother." I sat at my kitchen island, watching the notifications roll in like a tide of sewage. It was a coordinated attack designed to hit my weakest point. For years, my role in the family had been the good one, the reliable one. Kara knew that I prided myself on being responsible. She was trying to invert that reality, to gaslight the entire extended family into believing I was the monster. I did not reply to any of them. I took screenshots. I archived them in a folder named Harassment. When the family pressure did not break me, Kara escalated to the nuclear option. She went after my livelihood. On Wednesday morning, while I was working remotely from my living room, my cell phone rang. It was Kara. I answered on speakerphone, my recording app running in the background. "Are you enjoying the attention?" she asked. Her voice was brittle, like dry leaves. I am working, Kara, I said. What do you want? I want you to stop playing games, she hissed. I know what you're doing. You're trying to run out the clock. But I'm not going to let you. If you don't sign those papers by noon today, I am going to call Meridian Risk Analytics. I stopped typing. You are going to call my employer. Yes, she said. I am going to call your HR department. I am going to tell them that you are having a mental health crisis. I am going to tell them that you have kidnapped our mother and are holding her against her will. I wonder how a compliance officer looks when she is the subject of a police welfare check. It was a credible threat. In my line of work, reputation is currency. A messy domestic dispute, especially one involving allegations of elder abuse or mental instability, could trigger an internal suspension pending investigation. She knew exactly where to aim. Do what you have to do, I said, and hung up. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from rage. She was willing to burn down my career, the one thing I had built entirely on my own, just to get access to a cabin she didn't earn. I did not wait for her to make the call. I went on the offensive. I dialed the internal number for the Human Resources Director at Meridian. I had a good relationship with her. I kept my voice calm, professional, and detached. I am calling to give you a heads up regarding a personal legal matter, I told her. I am currently the target of an extortion attempt by an estranged family member. There is a police report on file as of yesterday. She has threatened to contact the company to make false allegations in an attempt to leverage me. I wanted to get ahead of it and provide you with the case number for your files. The director was sympathetic and professional. Thank you for letting us know. Isla, we will flag any external communications regarding you. If she calls, she will be directed to legal. You are safe here. I hung up, feeling the armor of my professional life lock into place. Kara thought she could use my job as a hostage. She didn't realize that in my world, we document threats. We don't surrender to them. But the war wasn't just happening on my phone. It was happening in my kitchen. My mother was physically present in my apartment, but emotionally, she was oscillating between the woman I remembered and a stranger I couldn't recognize. She spent the days sighing, wrapping herself in blankets, and looking at me with those wide, wounded eyes. On Thursday evening, the night before the scheduled bank meeting, the tension finally snapped. I was making dinner. My mother was sitting at the table, picking at a piece of bread. She had been asking about the papers every hour on the hour. Kara is just worried about me, my mother said, breaking the silence. You shouldn't be so hard on her. She organized the whole rescue. I organized the rescue, I said, chopping a carrot with a little too much force. I drove the car. I picked you up. But Kara called you, Mom insisted. She said it was the only way. I stopped chopping. I turned to look at her. What did she say was the only way? I asked softly. My mother looked down at her hands. Getting you to come. Getting you to sign. Kara said if we just explained it to you, you would say no. She said if you saw me in trouble, you would remember that you love me. So the storm was a test, I asked. It was a nudge, Mom corrected, using a word that made my stomach turn. Kara said just sign the papers and it would all be over. She said, Mom, just stand there for a little bit, and Isla will come, and then we can save the house. Save the house. I walked closer to the table. You mean steal the cabin? It is not stealing, Mom cried, tears springing to her eyes instantly. It is family property. Why do you have to be so selfish? You have this big apartment. You have a good job. Kara has nothing. She just needs a start. And what about me? I asked. I drove 200 miles. I risked my life. Did that part matter to you? Of course it mattered, she sobbed. I was freezing. Isla, I was so cold. I know you were cold, I said. But here's the question, Mom, and I want you to answer me honestly. I leaned in, placing my hands on the table. Did you know she was going to drive away? I asked. When you got out of that SUV at the gas station, did you know Kara was going to leave you there alone? My mother froze. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. She looked at the refrigerator. She looked at the window. She looked anywhere but at me. She said she would be right around the corner, Mom whispered. That is not what I asked, I said. Did you know she was leaving you? Did you agree to be abandoned? The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. It stretched for 10 seconds, 20. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no. She had agreed to it. She had agreed to be the bait. She had agreed to risk her own life, to stand in a blizzard, just to emotionally manipulate me into signing a document. She loved Kara enough to die for her scheme. She loved me enough to what? To use me. I see. I said, Isla, please. She reached for my hand. I pulled back. You have 2 choices, right now. My voice was ice. Option 1. You pack your bag. I will call an Uber. You can go to Kara's apartment. You can explain to her why you failed, and you never call me again. My mother's face went white. Option 2, I continued. You stay here. You go to that bank with me tomorrow, and when we sit down at that table, you tell the truth. You tell the lawyer exactly what Kara told you to do. I can't, she whimpered. Kara will be so angry. I don't care about Kara's anger, I said. I care about the truth. If you want a relationship with me, if you want a daughter named Isla, you will pick option 2. If you pick Kara, you leave, now. She looked at me, terrified. She had never seen me like this. She was used to Isla the doormat, Isla the fixer. She didn't know how to handle Isla the auditor. I will stay, she whispered. I will be good. I promise. Good, I said. Go to your room. She went, but the deception didn't end there. At 2 a.m, I woke up. I needed water. As I walked past the guest room, I heard it, a low mumble. I stood by the door. She is making me, my mother was whispering. Yes, tomorrow. I promise. Kara, I will do it. Just don't yell at me. I am doing my best. She had a second phone, or maybe she had hidden hers before I took the decoy. It didn't matter. She was still coordinating. She was still playing both sides. She was promising me truth and promising Kara compliance. I didn't burst in. I didn't scream. I went back to my room and grabbed my dictaphone, a tool I used for work notes. I stood outside her door and recorded 5 minutes of the conversation. I recorded her agreeing to stick to the script one last time. In my state, New York, the law regarding recording is one-party consent. I was not a party to this conversation, which made it inadmissible in a criminal court. But my lawyer had told me that for the purpose of a protective order or a civil competency hearing, it could be vital evidence of conspiracy and coercion. I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling fan, and I felt something shift inside me. The last vestige of the little girl who wanted her mother's approval finally died. It didn't go out with a bang. It just flickered and went dark. For years, I had been afraid of losing my family. I had been afraid of being an orphan. But as I lay there, listening to my mother plot against me in the next room, I realized I had been an orphan for a long time. They weren't my family. They were a liability. The fear vanished. The guilt vanished. All that was left was the cold, hard clarity of the task ahead. When the sun rose on Friday morning, I wasn't angry anymore. I was efficient. I made coffee. I ironed my shirt. I drove the car. Kara thought she was walking into a bank to rob me. My mother thought she was walking into a bank to keep the peace. They were both wrong. They were walking into an exit interview, and I was the one holding the termination papers. The conference room at Summit Crest Lending was a glass aquarium located in the center of the branch, designed to make customers feel like their financial dreams were transparent and within reach. To me, it looked like an interrogation room with better furniture. I sat on one side of the long mahogany table. My mother sat next to me, her hands folded in her lap, looking small and expectant. Across from us sat Kara, radiating the manic energy of a gambler about to cash in a winning ticket. Next to her was Mr. Henderson, the so-called mobile notary, who was sweating despite the aggressive air conditioning. Kara did not waste time with pleasantries. She reached into her oversized tote bag and pulled out a stack of documents 3 inches thick. She dropped them onto the table with a heavy, authoritative thud. "Okay," Kara said, uncapping a pen. "Let us get this done. I have lunch reservations at 12. I looked at the pile. It was not just the power of attorney we had discussed at the motel. I saw the blue-bordered pages of a loan application. I saw a deed transfer form. I saw a change of address confirmation. She had brought everything. She was not just trying to get a foothold. She was trying to liquidate my existence. "This is a lot of paper," I said, pitching my voice to sound tremulous and overwhelmed. I needed them to speak. I needed the microphones hidden in the ceiling fixtures' standard security for bank closing rooms to pick up every syllable. "It is just standard protocol, Isla," Kara said, pushing the stack toward me. "We talked about this. The power of attorney lets me handle Mom's medical bills. The other stuff is just housekeeping, updating the trust to make sure the cabin is protected." "Protected from what?" I asked, picking up the loan application. "This says home equity line of credit for $175,000. Kara didn't blink. "That is for repairs. The cabin needs a new roof, and Mom needs liquidity for her treatments. Just sign where the sticky notes are. Mr. Henderson is here to witness it." Mr. Henderson gave a nervous little wave. "Right here, ma'am." "Just a formality." I looked at him. "Are you sure this is the right county for your stamp? Mr. Henderson, I thought you were based in Westchester." He froze. His eyes darted to Kara. "He travels," Kara snapped. "Stop stalling. Isla, Mom is sitting right here. Look at her. Do you want her to suffer because you are too paranoid to sign a piece of paper?" I looked at my mother. She was staring at the loan application with a confused expression. "Isla," Mom whispered. "Kara said this was just to put the house in a trust. She didn't say anything about a loan. It is a safety net." "Mom," Kara said, her voice rising. "God, why does everyone have to question me? I am the only one trying to save this family. Isla, pick up the pen." I picked up the pen. My hand was shaking, but not from fear. It was shaking from the sheer effort of holding back the truth for 30 seconds longer. "So," I said, looking directly at Kara, "if I sign this, you get control of the cabin, and the money goes into an account you control." "It goes into the family account," Kara corrected, "which I manage because I am the one who is actually here for Mom." "And the address change?" I asked. "To the P.O. box. So I don't miss any bills," Kara said. "Sign the papers. Isla." I lowered the pen to the paper. I watched Kara's eyes widen with greed. She leaned forward, practically vibrating. "I can't," I said, dropping the pen. "What?" Kara shrieked. "I can't sign it," I said, "because the ink is dry." Before Kara could respond, the heavy glass door to the conference room swung open. Mr. Sterling, the regional risk manager, walked in. He was not smiling. Behind him walked a woman in a severe black suit, the bank compliance officer, and behind her, filling the doorway with a presence that sucked the oxygen out of the room, was a uniformed police officer from the Oakville precinct. Kara stood up so fast her chair tipped over backward. "What is this?" she demanded. "Who are you?" "Please sit down, Ms. Callahan." "Mr. Sterling said. His voice was calm, the voice of a man who held all the cards. "I am the risk manager for this branch. This is my compliance officer, and Officer Miller, no relation, is here to assist us with a verification of identity." "We are just signing family papers," Kara stammered, her face flushing red. "We don't need verification. We have a notary." Sterling turned his gaze to Mr. Henderson. The little man looked like he was about to vomit. "Mr. Henderson," Sterling said, consulting a tablet in his hand. "We ran a verification on the commission number visible on your stamp from the security footage of your arrival. That commission number belongs to a woman named Beatrice Klyan, who died in 1998. Mr. Henderson made a small, squeaking noise. "Fraudulent impersonation of a public official is a felony," the police officer said, speaking for the first time. as is conspiracy to commit bank fraud. Henderson stood up. I didn't sign anything. She hired me. He pointed a trembling finger at Kara. She said it was just a family dispute. She paid me $500 to look official. Shut up, Kara screamed at him. Sit down, the officer commanded. Henderson collapsed back into his chair. Kara turned to me, her eyes wild. You did this. You set me up. I didn't set you up. Kara, I said, my voice steady and cold. I just turned on the lights. This is ridiculous, Kara spat, grabbing her purse. Come on, Mom, we are leaving. Isla is having a psychotic break. Nobody is leaving, Sterling said. Not yet. We have a pending loan application in our system initiated under the name Isla Miller. The IP address for that application traces back to your apartment complex, Ms. Callahan. And the phone number associated with the two-factor authentication is yours. That is a mistake, Kara said, but her voice was thinning. Mom asked me to help her. Mom told me to do it. She turned to Mom, grabbing her arm. Tell them. Mom, tell them you told me to apply for the loan to fix the roof. My mother looked terrified. She pulled her arm away. I didn't know about a loan, Kara. You said it was just paperwork. Don't lie, Kara yelled. You knew you wanted the money just as much as I did. I think we should look at the timeline, Sterling said. He pressed a button on a remote control, the large monitor on the wall, which usually displayed interest rates and happy families buying homes, flickered to life. The footage from the Pine Hollow gas station appeared. It was grainy, black and white, but the image was unmistakable. The room went silent. On the screen, the black SUV sat in the corner of the lot. The timestamp read 10:22 at night. We watched as the passenger door opened. We watched my mother step out. We watched Kara hand her the dry bag. We watched Kara point to the spot against the wall. And then, we watched Kara drive away. We watched my mother standing there, alone, in the swirling snow. We saw her wrap her thin coat tighter. We saw her check her phone. We saw her waiting. I looked at my mother. She was staring at the screen, her hand covering her mouth. She was weeping silently. You left me, Mom whispered. Kara didn't look at the screen. She was staring at me with pure hatred. I was parked around the corner. Kara lied. I was watching the whole time. No, you weren't, Sterling said. We have footage from the traffic camera at the intersection of Route 9 and County Road 4. You drove 3 miles away to a diner. You sat there for 45 minutes. You only drove back when you saw your sister's GPS tracker, which you illegally installed on her phone, enter the vicinity. Kara faltered. My mother stood up. She was shaking. But this time, it wasn't an act. You left me, she repeated, her voice gaining volume. You promised you wouldn't leave, Kara. I had to make it look real, Kara shouted, losing control. Isla wouldn't have come if it didn't look real. You agreed to the script. The word hung in the air. Script. I agreed to pretend my car broke down, Mom screamed back, tears streaming down her face. I agreed to call her. But you said you would be right there. You said I could sit in your car until she got close. You drove away. Kara, I was freezing. I thought you abandoned me. I did what I had to do, Kara yelled. Because you are too weak to get the money yourself, you just whine about being poor. But you never do anything about it. I did this for us. You did it for yourself, I said quietly. Shut up, Isla. Kara lunged toward me, but the police officer stepped between us, his hand resting on his belt. Ms. Callahan, the officer said. Step back. Kara stopped. She looked around the room. She saw the compliance officer taking notes. She saw Sterling watching her with the detached gaze of an executioner. She saw the notary cowering, and she saw Mom. Mom was looking at Kara not as her golden child, but as the person who had almost killed her. You told me, Mom sobbed, that if Isla signed the papers, we would keep the house. You said she was going to sell the cabin and leave us with nothing. That is why I did it. That is why I lied. She is going to sell it, Kara insisted. No, I said. I wasn't. But I'm definitely not giving it to you. The compliance officer cleared her throat. We have a confession of conspiracy to defraud, captured on audio and video. We have evidence of identity theft regarding the loan application. We have evidence of mail fraud regarding the address change. And we have the fraudulent notarization attempt occurring right now. Kara looked at the officer, then at me. Her face crumpled. The arrogance dissolved, replaced by the panicked look of a child who realizes the game is over. She is lying, Kara whispered, pointing at Mom. She is senile. She is agitated. She doesn't know what she is saying. Isla put her up to this. Isla brainwashed her. The footage doesn't lie. Ms. Callahan, Sterling said. And neither does the paperwork you just tried to force your sister to sign. Sterling nodded to the officer. Kara Callahan, the officer said, I am going to ask you to come with me to the station to answer some questions regarding an active fraud investigation. No, Kara said, backing away. No, this is a family matter. You can't arrest me for a family matter. Fraud is not a family matter, the officer said, taking a pair of handcuffs from his belt. Turn around, please, Kara screamed. It was a high, thin sound of disbelief. She looked at Mom. Mom, stop them. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them I am your daughter. My mother looked at Kara. She wiped her eyes. She looked at the screen where the image of her frozen, abandoned figure was paused. I am your daughter, Kara shrieked as the officer took her arm. Mom took a breath. She looked at me, then she looked at Kara. You are not my daughter, Mom whispered. A daughter wouldn't leave her mother to die in the snow. Kara was led out of the room, still screaming, her voice echoing off the glass walls until the heavy door clicked shut. The room fell silent. The only sound was the hum of the hard drive on the table. Mr. Henderson was weeping softly into his hands. Sterling looked at me. We will need a statement from you, Ms. Miller, and we will need to process the cancellation of the loan application formally. Of course, I said. I looked at my mother. She had collapsed back into her chair. She looked old, defeated. The script was gone. The stage had been dismantled. Isla, she whispered, not looking at me. I didn't know. You knew enough, I said. I gathered my briefcase. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt clean. The air in the room was finally breathable. Let's finish the paperwork, I said to Sterling. I want to go home, but as I looked at the glass door where Kara had vanished, I knew that home was a word I would have to redefine from scratch. The implosion of a family does not sound like a bomb going off. It sounds like the scratching of a pen on paper, the click of a door lock engaging, and the ceaseless, buzzing silence of a phone that has been silenced. After Kara was escorted out of Summit Crest Lending by the Oakville police, the energy in the room shifted from high-stakes drama to bureaucratic cleanup. Mr. Sterling, the risk manager, did not offer me a shoulder to cry on. He offered me a shredder. We sat there for another hour, methodically dismantling the financial trap Kara had built. Sterling formally marked the loan application as fraudulent identity theft in the system. This triggered an automatic report to the credit bureaus, scrubbing the hard inquiry from my history. It also generated a suspicious activity report, which would be sent to federal regulators. We are freezing the file, Sterling said, his voice devoid of emotion. No further applications will be accepted from any party using this social security number without in-person biometric verification. You are locked down, Ms. Miller. Thank you, I said. Mr. Henderson, the notary who had played his part so poorly, was currently sitting in a separate office giving a statement to the police. His career was over. The compliance officer informed me that a formal complaint was being filed with the Department of State's licensing division. He would lose his commission, and given the felony fraud charges, he was looking at prison time. He was a small fish who had swum into a shark tank, and he had been eaten alive. I left the bank with my mother. She was silent, pale, and trembling. She did not look at me. She sat in the passenger seat of my Subaru like a prisoner being transferred between facilities. When we got back to my apartment, I did not make tea. I did not offer comfort. I went straight to my home office and called Mr. Reynolds, my lawyer. "It is done," I told him. "Kara was arrested. The bank has the evidence." "Good," Reynolds said. "I am filing for a temporary restraining order immediately. Based on the police report and the video evidence of the staged endangerment, a judge will grant it by the end of the day. It will cover you and your property. Do you want it to cover your mother as well?" I looked through the open door at my mother, who was sitting on the edge of the guest bed, staring at the wall. "No," I said. "Mom is an adult. She can decide who she wants to be protected from. But the order must prevent Kara from entering my home or contacting me at work." "Understood," Reynolds said. "I will also send a cease and desist letter regarding the defamation. If she speaks to your employer again, we sue for damages." By Friday evening, the reality of the situation began to settle in. It was a heavy, suffocating dust. My phone began to light up. Kara had made bail. I knew this because the tone of the messages changed. The aggressive, entitled sister who demanded signatures was gone. In her place was a desperate, weeping child. "Isla, please pick up. I am scared. Isla, they are talking about felony charges. You have to drop the complaint. Please, I am your sister. Isla, I just wanted fairness. I just wanted what was best for Mom. Why are you doing this to me?" I listened to the voicemails, transcribed them, and emailed them to Reynolds. I did not feel a tug at my heartstrings. I felt only a clinical observation of her tactics. She was still trying to manipulate the narrative. "I just wanted fairness," she said, to Kara. Fairness meant she got what she wanted, and I paid for it. Then, the flying monkeys arrived. The aunts and cousins who had bombarded me with hate mail earlier in the week suddenly went quiet. I had instructed Reynolds to send a brief, factual summary to the family members who had contacted me. It was not emotional. It was a PDF containing the police report number, a summary of the charges, identity theft, elder endangerment, fraud, and a screenshot of the video showing Kara driving away from the gas station. The silence that followed was deafening. There were no apologies. No, "I am sorry I called you a bad daughter." Just a terrified, guilty silence. They realized they had been cheering for a predator. They realized that if Kara could do that to her own mother in a snowstorm, she could do it to any of them. Living with my mother for those next 48 hours was the hardest part. She moved through my apartment like a ghost. She was terrified. She had seen her golden child in handcuffs, and the shock had broken something in her. But mixed with the fear was a simmering, toxic resentment directed at me. "You didn't have to let them arrest her," Mom said on Saturday morning, staring into her coffee cup. "I didn't let them do anything," I replied, buttering my toast. "Kara broke the law. The bank called the police." "You could have stopped it," she whispered. "You could have just signed the papers. Isla, none of this would have happened if you had just signed." I put down my knife. The sound was loud in the quiet kitchen. "If I had signed," I said, looking directly at her, "Kara would have stolen the cabin, spent the money, and left you with nothing. And when the money ran out, she would have done it again. You were the bait. Mom, don't you understand that she left you in the snow?" "She came back," Mom defended weakly. "She was watching me." "She was eating a cheeseburger 3 miles away," I corrected her. "We saw the footage. Stop lying to yourself." She began to cry, the weeping of a woman who knows the truth but cannot bear to look at it. She was angry at me not because I was wrong, but because I had stripped away the illusion that she had a loving family. I had forced her to see the rot, and she hated me for the view. I realized then that she could not stay with me. She was a liability. As long as she was in my house, she was a back door for Kara. She would open the door. She would pass along information. She was addicted to the drama, and I was in recovery. I spent Saturday afternoon making calls. I found a place called Shady Pines, not the real name, but close enough in spirit. It was an assisted living facility 2 towns over. It was clean, reputable, and secure. It was not a luxury resort, but it was safe. I used my authority, not the power of attorney Kara wanted. but the limited medical proxy I had actually signed years ago to arrange an emergency placement for social respite. On Sunday morning, I packed her bags. "Where are we going?" Mom asked, clutching her purse. "Are you taking me to Kara?" "Kara is not allowed to see you right now," I said. "I am taking you somewhere safe, somewhere where you won't have to wait in the snow." The drive was quiet. When we pulled up to the facility, Mom looked at the building with fear. "You are putting me in a home," she accused. "You are abandoning me." I parked the car and turned to her. "I am not abandoning you," I said. "I am paying for your first month. I am making sure you have food and heat, but I cannot have you in my house. Mom, you conspired to defraud me. You agreed to trick me. I love you, but I will not be your collateral damage anymore." I walked her inside. I signed the admission papers. I gave the staff a copy of the police report and the instructions that Kara Callahan was not permitted on the premises. When I left, Mom was sitting in a chair in the common room, looking small and lost. She didn't wave goodbye. She just stared at the floor, waiting for someone to give her a script. I walked out to my car, and for the first time in a week, my shoulders dropped. I spent the rest of Sunday fortifying my life. I went to the cabin. I called a locksmith to meet me there. We changed every lock on the property. I installed a security system with cameras that fed directly to my phone. I walked the perimeter of the property, my grandfather's land, and I felt a fierce sense of ownership. This was not family property anymore. It was mine, and I would defend it. I contacted the credit bureaus and placed a permanent freeze on my file. I changed my phone number. I changed my email passwords. I moved my physical files into a safety deposit box at a bank that had nothing to do with Summit Crest. On Monday, the other shoe dropped for Kara. I received a call from the Director of Human Resources at Meridian Risk Analytics. She wanted to update me on the harassment issue I had flagged. "We received a subpoena this morning," she told me, "regarding an investigation into one of your relatives." "I am aware," I said. "I hope it doesn't affect the company." "It doesn't affect us," she said. "But it seems the individual in question, your sister, used her own corporate email address to send the scanned copies of the forged documents to the lender. Her employer's compliance department flagged it during the police inquiry." I almost laughed. Kara, the golden child, had been so arrogant, so sure of her victory, that she hadn't even bothered to use a burner email. She had used her work account. "She has been terminated for cause," my director said. "And since she works in a regulated industry, she is likely being blacklisted." Kara had tried to destroy my career by calling my HR department. Instead, she had destroyed her own by leaving a digital fingerprint on the murder weapon. But the final blow didn't land on Kara. It landed on Mom. A few days later, a letter arrived at my P.O. box, the one I had set up for my own mail. Not the fraudulent one Kara created. It was forwarded from my mother's old address. It was from a credit card company. I opened it. It was a demand for payment. $12,000. I looked at the dates. These charges were from 3 years ago. I dug deeper. I found more letters. It turned out that the dry bag at the gas station wasn't the first time Mom had carried papers for Kara. For years, my mother had been co-signing. She had been taking out small loans. She had been opening store credit cards. She had been silently funding Kara's lifestyle, bleeding her own small pension dry, and hiding the debt in a mountain of unopened envelopes. Kara hadn't just started using Mom. She had been cannibalizing her for a decade, and Mom had let her. I sat at my desk, looking at the statements. I realized then that the tragedy wasn't just the snowstorm. The tragedy was that my mother had been freezing by degrees for years. She had given pieces of herself her credit, her dignity, her safety to keep Kara warm. And when there was nothing left to burn, they had turned to me. I put the letters in a file marked Mother's Debts. I would not pay them. I would not fix this. But as I sat there in the silence of my secure, locked apartment, a question gnawed at me, a question that the police report couldn't answer. Kara was the aggressor. That was clear. She was the one who drove the car. She was the one who printed the papers. But who was the architect? Kara was greedy. but she was also sloppy. She used her work email. She hired a fake notary with an expired stamp. These were the mistakes of an amateur. But the emotional manipulation, the guilt trips, the precise timing of the "I am freezing" phone call, the way Mom knew exactly which buttons to push to get me to drive 200 miles, that required a lifetime of study. That required someone who knew me better than I knew myself. I thought back to the gas station video. My mother laughing in the car. Was she laughing because she was having fun with her daughter? Or was she laughing because she knew she was about to give the performance of her life? Kara needed the money. But Mom needed the attention. She needed the drama. She needed to be the center of a storm that forced her children to fight over her. Kara might have written the loan application, but I began to suspect, with a sickening clarity, that my mother had written the scene, and that was a level of cold that no heater could ever fix. The final confrontation did not happen in a dramatic courtroom with a gavel banging on a wooden desk. It happened in a sterile, gray mediation room at the county courthouse 3 weeks later. This was the hearing for the permanent protective order, a necessary legal step before the criminal fraud charges fully took over the narrative. The room smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. I sat on the left side of the long table next to my lawyer, Mr. Reynolds. On the right side sat Kara and my mother. They were sitting together, but there was a distinct gap between their chairs, a physical manifestation of the blame they were silently hurling at each other. Kara looked diminished. Without her expensive corporate attire, she was wearing a simple sweater and slacks now, and stripped of her job title. She looked like what she really was, a bully who had been called into the principal's office. My mother, Denise, was back in her role as the frail victim. She had a tissue clutched in her hand, dabbing at dry eyes every time the court mediator looked her way. Mr. Reynolds did not waste time with theatrics. He treated the proceedings with the cold precision of a surgeon. "We are submitting Exhibit A," Reynolds said, sliding a thick binder across the table to the mediator. "This contains the timeline of events, the text message from Ms. Callahan to Ms. Callahan Sr., instructing her to stick to the script, the unauthorized change of address form submitted 2 weeks prior to the incident, the fraudulent loan application with Summit Crest Lending for $175,000. The mediator, a woman with glasses and a tired expression, flipped through the pages. "And," Reynolds continued, "we have the security footage from the Pine Hollow gas station, showing the respondents staging the scene of the alleged emergency." Kara shifted in her seat. "I have explained this," she said, her voice tight. "I was monitoring her safety. It was a misunderstanding." "It was endangerment," Reynolds corrected her. "But the core of this hearing is to establish the pattern of harassment and financial coercion that necessitates a permanent order of protection for my client." Kara slammed her hand on the table. It was a weak impact, lacking her usual fire. "This is not coercion," Kara snapped. "It was a family plan. Mom wanted this. Mom called me and said we needed to get Isla to sign the trust papers because she was afraid Isla was going to sell the cabin." She turned on my mother, her eyes wide and accusatory. "Tell them, Mom," Kara demanded. "Tell them it was your idea to go to the gas station. You said, 'Isla always plays the hero, so let us give her someone to save.' That was your line, Mom." My mother shrank back, looking at the mediator with trembling lips. "I never said that," Mom whimpered. "I just wanted everyone to get along. Kara told me that if Isla signed the paper, the house would be safe. She promised me that no money would be taken out. She promised it was just a formality." "You liar," Kara shrieked. "You knew about the loan. We talked about using the money to pay off your credit cards. You have $20,000 in debt that you are hiding." "I don't," Mom cried. "I don't know what she is talking about." They were eating each other. It was grotesque, but it was also clarifying. They were fighting over the narrative, fighting to see who could play the victim better. Kara was the aggressive mastermind, but Mom was the willing accomplice who was now trying to rewrite history to save her own skin. I watched them, feeling absolutely nothing. The anger had burned out days ago, leaving only ash. "Enough," I said. The word was quiet, but it cut through their shouting match like a razor. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. I placed it on the table. "I think we need to clarify the chain of command," I said. "This is a recording taken outside the guest bedroom in my apartment on the night of Thursday the 12th. This was after I had brought Mom home. This was while she was eating my food and sleeping in my bed, supposedly recovering from the trauma." Kara stopped breathing. Mom went still. I pressed play. The audio was clear. The silence of the hallway amplified the whispers. Mom's voice. "She is making me. Yes. Tomorrow. I promise. Kara, I will do it. Just don't yell at me. I am doing my best." Pause. Mom's voice. Kara said, "Just sign it, and it is over. I know. I will tell her I am sick again if she hesitates. I will make her feel guilty." I pressed stop. The silence in the room was absolute. That recording was the killing blow. It stripped away Mom's defense of ignorance. It stripped away Kara's defense of acting alone. It proved they were colluding, actively plotting to manipulate me emotionally and financially, even after I had rescued them. "That," Reynolds said, gesturing to the phone, "is evidence of conspiracy. Ms. Miller was not a daughter to these women. She was a mark. She was a target." The mediator closed the binder. She looked at Kara, then at Mom. Her expression was one of profound distaste. "The order of protection is granted," the mediator said, her voice flat. 5 years, no contact, no proximity to the petitioner's home, place of employment, or the property known as the Callahan cabin. Any violation will result in immediate arrest. She turned to Kara. "Regarding the fraud evidence, this office will be forwarding all exhibits to the district attorney for the pending criminal investigation. Good luck, Ms. Callahan. You are going to need it." Kara looked at me. For the first time, there was no anger in her eyes. There was no scheming. There was only shock. She looked at me as if she had never seen me before. She was realizing that the sister she had spent a lifetime pushing around had finally pushed back, and she had fallen off the cliff. "Isla," Kara whispered, "you are sending me to jail." "No," I said, standing up and gathering my things. "You sent yourself to jail when you forged my signature. I just provided the postage." I walked out of the room. Mr. Reynolds stayed behind to finalize the paperwork. I needed air. I walked down the long, marble corridor of the courthouse. My heels clicked on the floor, a steady, rhythmic sound that felt like a heartbeat. "Isla, wait." I stopped. I didn't turn around immediately. I took a breath. Then I turned. My mother was hurrying after me. She looked old. The stress of the last week had aged her 10 years. She stopped a few feet away from me, afraid to come closer. "Isla," she said, her voice shaking. "You can't leave it like this. Where am I supposed to go?" "Kara is in trouble." "I can't stay with her." "You are staying at Shady Pines," I said. "I paid for the month. You have time to figure out your next move." "But I am your mother," she pleaded. Tears began to stream down her face, the same tears she had used in the kitchen, the same tears she had used at the gas station. "You are my daughter. How can you be so cold? Do you want me to die alone?" She reached out a hand, trying to bridge the gap, trying to touch the part of me that had always been desperate for her love. I looked at her hand. I looked at her face. I remembered the text message. "Stick to the script." I remembered the recording. "I will make her feel guilty." "You asked if I want you to die alone," I said softly. I took a step closer, not to comfort her, but to make sure she heard me clearly. "Mom, you stood in a snowstorm and waited for me to come save you. You risked your life, but you didn't do it because you needed saving. You did it because you needed a signature." I looked her dead in the eye. "You tried to let me die by degrees," I said. "You tried to kill my future, my security, and my sanity, just to keep Kara comfortable. You didn't care if I drowned in debt, as long as you didn't have to face the truth." I stepped back. "I didn't abandon you in the snow, Mom, but I am leaving you in the hallway. Do not follow me." I turned and walked away. Isla, she screamed behind me. It was a raw, desperate sound. I kept walking. I walked through the security checkpoint. I walked out the heavy brass doors. I walked into the bright, cold sunshine of the afternoon. I got into my car and drove. I did not drive back to my apartment. I drove north. I drove the same 200 miles I had driven that night. But this time, the sky was clear. The road was dry. There was no blizzard blinding me. There was no SUV following me. I arrived at the cabin just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of violet and bruised orange. The snow was deep, pristine and white, untouched by footprints. I walked up the steps to the deck. I put the key in the new lock, the lock that Kara did not have a copy of. The bolt slid back with a satisfying, heavy thunk. I pushed the door open. The air inside was cold and still. It smelled of pine and old wood, the scent of my grandfather. I walked to the center of the room. I stood there in the silence. For my entire life, this silence had terrified me. It was the silence of being the outsider, the silence of being the second choice. But now, as I stood there, I realized it wasn't empty silence. It was peace. I did not hear Kara's demands. I did not hear my mother's guilt. I did not hear the constant, grinding pressure to set myself on fire to keep them warm. I took out my phone. I opened my banking app. I saw the green shield icon indicating my credit was frozen. I saw the confirmation from the lawyer that the trust was now irrevocable, with a new beneficiary designated in case of my death, a charity for financial literacy. Not my family. I had done it. I had closed the loop. I walked over to the fireplace and began to stack the wood. I struck a match and watched the flame catch the kindling. The fire grew, orange and bright, chasing away the shadows in the room. I sat down in the old leather armchair and watched the fire dance. I thought about that night at the gas station. I remembered the feeling of my mother's hand in mine. It had been cold, cold as metal, cold as the calculation that put her there. I had driven through a storm to save her from freezing, and I had succeeded. She was alive. She was safe. But as the warmth of the fire finally reached my face, I realized the true rescue hadn't happened in the parking lot of Pine Hollow Fuel. It had happened in the lawyer's office. It had happened in the bank. It had happened in the hallway when I finally walked away. I had saved my mother from the ice, but I had saved myself from the family. And for the first time in 36 years, I wasn't cold anymore. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from your car, your kitchen, or maybe a quiet cabin of your own? Please leave a comment below to share your thoughts and connect with others. And if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share these stories with even more people.